I'm Luca Giliberti, contributing writer at Gold Derby, and I'm joined today by Samantha Hanratty, who plays young Misty on Yellowjackets. What really stands out to me about Misty is that she's perhaps the most consistent character on this show, right? I think she's the
Mm,
one who is perhaps the most unchanged by what happens in the wilderness in the past.
uh,
So I'd be curious to hear from you as the person playing this part, whether there were still any moments in season three that of moments of hers that really surprised you, where you felt like you were still in the process of discovering her, or would you say you have reached a point where you have quite a good sense of how she's going to act in or react to a given situation?
I think, once you play a character for so long, you really start to understand them. And I think I really do understand Misty in a lot of ways. And so the thing about her is that she's always kind of been a little unpredictable. And
Mhm.
so I think that's what makes her consistent is that when she does something that's off, it's like, right, Misty would do that, So like,
Exactly.
yeah, she's always kind of had something that's a little bit off about her. And I think it's fun for me to I kind of diagnose her in ways. So, like, for me, like when it comes to the psychology of why she does what she does, I find that to be very interesting. And, especially this season, I think we got to see actually like step into her own a little bit of like with
Absolutely.
the trial and seeing like how she is very talented and very smart. And, like she is a lot more useful than I think a lot of people give her credit for. And I think this season we're able to see different sides of her, which I really appreciated. I think that it's been interesting to see the fan base reaction to the fact that, like, I mean, I believe that, she is a bit neurodivergent, that there are things
Hmm.
that are, that she has her own coping skills with things and kind of
Absolutely.
she's always been on the outside and how she kind of always tries to mask that with a smile or whatever. And so I think we've been able to see cracks through that stuff. Yeah, we've just seen a lot of different levels and layers to her. So I don't think I'm ever really too surprised by the things she does. However,
Mhm.
I think it's just nice that the audience is starting to see a little bit of a different side of her.
I briefly want to touch on this stretch between season two and season three that we don't get to actually see on the show because,
Yeah.
right? Because we know that Misty really thrives on people relying on her. I think that's why she really finds a purpose in the wilderness.
Yeah.
But one of the people who kind of relied most on her, at least in her head, is Ben, and he's kind of MIA in that stretch. So, how do you
Yeah.
think that affected Misty, and how do you think she compensated for that? What is ultimately a loss of power, a loss of control over him, or perhaps you see it as something different? You tell me.
I don't think she really had much time to focus on that because she knew if she acts sad about missing him when all these people think that he was this, monster, then she's going to be a target
Mm,
for, them being upset with her or whatever. So she's always playing a game in her head of what's going to get me liked, what can I do that's going to get me, further in this kind of game that's out here. And so I think that she didn't focus too much on been at that time of being like, okay, we got to get through winter. We got to get through this. And I mean, it's interesting, but by the sounds of it, with Van explaining everything, it seems like everybody kind of had their ways that they helped with, building this shelter.
right,
And I
right.
don't know why, but in my head, I just see that being such a struggle for Misty of like everybody else is doing things that are like helpful and great. And like she's not necessarily the most physically strong. So like,
Right.
I could have seen that time being quite difficult of her wanting to be more of the logistics person of being like, well, if you set the shelter here or if you do this or that or
Hmm.
whatever it is, but probably just being more of an annoyance to everybody than actually, getting the chance to help. I think that that time was probably not the easiest, but then spring
Hmm.
came, and I
But then
think it was kind of
came.
like, almost like a camp vibe that they were having that I think that
Absolutely.
she was having kind of a nice time with. Like, like they played this game and they won and she got to be a part of it. And, I don't think that was the first time they played that game. It seemed like it was something that they kind of mastered at that point. So, I think that she has kind of found, her groove, which is what Misty does.
With the return of spring also comes the return of Ben because they eventually find him.
Yeah.
And then there's this, this heart to heart. Of course, there are many heart to hearts, if that's what we want to call it, between Misty and Ben
Yeah.
this season. But there's this first one where she really scolds him for betraying her, which I found really interesting. What do you think constitutes like a true, genuine betrayal for her at this point in her life, to the point where she would really say, you betrayed me?
The line is different for each person,
Mm-hmm.
So like Natalie, I feel like she literally killed Ben. And yet, like, it doesn't take long for Misty to then still want to be close to Natalie, like,
Mm-hmm.
even though she hurt her so bad. It's interesting. Yeah, I think it's just different with each person. And like, even with the way that she folded with Ben, like, the second she believed that, like, he didn't actually do that, it was like, okay, we're good now,
Exactly right.
Whereas, like, we see in the future, like with Walter, it's like just such a simple thing as him, uh, questioning her friendships, that was like, nope, that's it. I'm done with
Yeah.
you. I don't want, like, but, even with Shauna, it's like, how much has Shauna done? And when the line finally gets to be too much for her, it's just that's something that fascinates me about Misty. But yeah, I think that it really is just very dependent on who the person is. Like I said, I can personally relate. Like, I feel like it's like a weird thing with, like, friendship breakups have always hurt me way more than like relationship breakups. And
Mm-hmm.
and like, especially with like girlfriends. And I think it's because I've like held it to like a sister relationship, in my own world. And so I think that yeah, it's like we all have our boundaries with what hurts and what doesn't, and what,
Right.
what that line looks like. And so with Misty, it's definitely person by person.
Obviously, as you mentioned, then after that comes this mock trial where she serves as Ben's lawyer. And I'd
Yes.
be really interested to hear how you played that part, because how much of Ben's defense is really her genuinely wanting to defend him, to kind of clear him of wrongdoing, versus her, wanting to prove her worth to the group and wanting to kind of emerge as the hero at the end of the day.
She has saved Ben's life now twice at this point, and
Mm-hmm.
this is her third time and her third attempt to do so. And I think that she takes it very seriously. And I think that's something I love about Misty, is she takes everything very seriously.
Very
Um,
seriously.
yeah. But I also think there's a part of her that, even though she was never technically on the team, she is a player herself. And I think she really sees this as, I want to win.
Mm-hmm.
I want to win. She thinks of herself as the smartest person in the room. And so I think it's also a weird exercise in a way too, of manipulation, of knowing, when I talk to Mari, what's going to get Mari to confess this or that. And when I talk to
Uh-huh.
Shauna, oh, I'm going to go the angle of hurt and sadness, and whatever, like. And when I talk to Lottie, it's more logical and spiritual, and whatever it is. And so she finds her way through things. And I think with Ben, it's so interesting because she's so wanting so bad for him to give what he ends up doing, but like a true, like, performance of sorrow. And
Mm-hmm.
when he's not doing that, you can really see her cracks of frustration, of being like,
Right.
then what the fuck are you doing, Ben? Like, like, well, why are we here? But yeah, it's fun for me to play her, because she does try every angle of what she can do and what she can accomplish. But I do think there was a majority part of her just wanting to save his life and also appease
Mhm.
Natalie, because she saw that Natalie was also
Exactly.
on their team.
Unfortunately, Ben loses the trial. And that's a major blow to Misty. And then on the heels of that, Natalie mercy kills him, which is yet another blow to Misty. So talk
Yes.
about how that 1-2 punch affects Misty and what's going through her head when Natalie walks out of that tent with the bloody knife in her hand.
It's so heavy. And I think that Misty takes on a lot of things. And I think that, like, it was interesting because when I was reading that Natalie was the one to do it,
Mhm.
at first, like, I first found out about it, and I was
Yeah.
like, what? Like, there was a
Yeah.
part of me that was like, oh, it was always supposed to be Misty. If somebody was going to take his life, it was going to be Misty. And then reading it, I was like, oh God, okay, this is quite beautiful and tragic and kind in a way, for it to be her, and for it to be at the hands of somebody who truly cared for him. And I think
Mhm.
Misty's always tried to love and care for him, but in her own way that's obsessive and scary. And so to know that it was at the hands of somebody who was doing it, um, for pure friendship and care, it was heartbreaking. And I think that like Misty, though, in that moment was feeling all those things of trying so hard to keep him alive. She didn't
Mhm.
necessarily, I feel like, even see him as human anymore. It was like he was her patient. He was
Her
her
patient.
like,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like
Her
her
job.
property that she needed to keep safe. And then all of a sudden somebody just stripped her from that. And it was like just she doesn't do well with change, and she doesn't do well with things being pulled under the rug from her. If
Mhm.
she's gonna even be like in on a plan, she wants to be in on the plan, you know.
Right.
And so that first guttural reaction of what did you do was, you know, I
Mm.
think just at first just complete and total betrayal.
Exactly.
And then when it came time to actually say goodbye to Ben and really see him and, you know, have the moment that I know is quite controversial of that kiss
I
while I
loved
was,
it.
yeah, me too. While I'm playing Misty, I try
Exactly.
my best not to judge her and I try my best to really understand her. And with that, the kiss for me was very sweet, and it was a way of saying goodbye to somebody that she truly loved, and also doing what she thought other people do. Like when
Mhm.
you say goodbye to somebody, that's what you do. And that was her first kiss. And which is, yeah, you know,
Devastating. Yeah,
yeah.
very
And now as an audience member, I can see why people are, you know, feeling the way that they are.
devastating.
But in the moment, like I said, like I had to really just fully dive in and do what I had to do. And I think that that's something that I really love about playing her is that my hope is when I play Misty that people can watch something and go, that was wrong, but there's a part of me that feels like it was right for her.
You know, not only is there this kiss, but there's also this moment where she kind of slaps herself, like she's trying to snap
Yeah.
herself out of it.
Yeah.
And I think you've kind of described that moment as her not allowing herself to kind of dwell in these emotions that she's feeling, because
Yeah.
those emotions could get her into a lot of trouble with the other Yellowjackets. So could
Yeah.
you elaborate a bit on that? What do you think that trouble is? And do you think she would like try to kill them, or what do you think she would do in that case?
There's always been, and I found like a pattern with Misty where she doesn't allow herself to really get too emotional. She does a lot of self talk that's very negative and very like, you're so stupid. You do this all the time. Like, you know, this thing. And then same thing with like as an adult being like, don't cry, babies cry. Like, you know, this
Exactly.
like,
Yeah.
yeah. And
Yeah.
so I wanted to kind of keep that same thing where it was like all of a sudden emotions are getting too heightened and I need to like a self regulate and be like, stop it. But also, if you don't, it could be a life or death situation. If you go out there and you're this hysterical, then they're not going to take you seriously. You're then going to be like, you know, looked at as, you know, a target in some way, like, you know. And I think she's also very smart in a lot of ways of knowing that like if she comes at things too emotionally, then people won't listen, you know? And so I
Mm-hmm.
think that, yeah, she, you know, and I've touched on this before, but I think I'm really, especially as like watching the season, really starting and also just understanding my own mental health and whatnot of really understanding that I do believe that she's very much so neurodivergent and kind of, you know, has a way of needing to self-regulate. And that was kind of one of those ways of self-regulating and getting herself out of what would have easily become a panic attack and easily become a spiral. Yeah, it was my favorite scene to film because it was challenging, it was tragic, it was like a question that so many people had of like, is Ben ever going to make it out of there? And if he doesn't, like, what's going to
Mm.
happen to him? And so
Yeah.
it just, yeah, I just wanted to really have that goodbye, you know, give it all it needed to have. And it was also very emotional because I love Steven and he's a fantastic,
Mm.
you know, fantastic actor, but also just like a fantastic scene partner to have
Right.
these emotional, vulnerable times with. And so, yeah, yeah, it was rough. It was rough. I'm still
Yeah.
having a hard time. I'm having a
As
hard
are
time
we.
honestly coping with all of them, like
All the
every
deaths.
single person. It's
It's
people
tough.
don't realize like how, you know, we get attached as the fans, but also like these are your castmates, these are your coworkers, these are people like I have
Exactly.
still not really allowed myself to accept Mari's fate. like I haven't
I
allowed
know.
myself to do
Mm,
it because Alexa was in my wedding. Like,
wow.
her and Kevin walked my dogs down the aisle. Like,
Wow. That.
I'm such a baby. I am gonna get emotional because I also just think about like I'm never gonna see her like in hair and makeup again. Like she's not gonna get dirty with us and like her getting like her clothes on. It's just yeah. Like I said, have
Goodbyes
not
are tough.
accepted it. And also knowing that this is a show where nobody is really safe. And even with us as the teen versions, it's like even though we know that Misty survives, adult Misty isn't safe. And also, like, very easily could it be that Misty all of a sudden goes missing for 5 years and we just don't
It's
see her?
true.
You know what I mean? Like,
Oh
the
my
show
God.
is
Yeah.
just, you just never know
You never
what's
know.
going to happen.
I watching as a fan, you also just have to worry about your favorite characters all the time. You just never know what's going to happen to them.
Which is
I
like
love it and hate it.
exactly, because that's the thing is I'm like, I know people were like, "Oh my God, I can't believe they like, just introduced Cody and now that he's dead and it was like so quick." And I'm like, as somebody who loves Joel McHale, I'm like, yeah, I can't believe it too. However,
Yeah. It's
I
Yellowjackets.
personally love that shit because I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my God, I love that you can literally meet somebody and then bye. And it's like,
Yeah.
what just happened? Because it's Yellow Jackets. You don't know what's going to happen. They're not afraid to take out your favorite character. And it has been some of the most beloved characters, in my opinion, that have gone. And I think that just shows
Mm,
that like the people that are too good for this world,
yeah.
too good for these people are, yeah, sometimes on the
Yeah.
chopping block.
You've talked about how Misty is and always will be Team Natalie, and that the two of them kind of have this like invisible tie or invisible bond. I think fans have their own theories about why that is, but why do you think they have such a special connection?
Sophie and I have talked about it, and I think that a lot of it has to do with that they are both true outsiders. Um, Natalie beats to her own drum and always has, and is not there for the bullshit. And even though Misty tries so hard, she's an outsider, and it doesn't matter how hard she tries, she's never going to get it quite right with this, especially with this group of people. But, besides Walter, I don't think anybody really understands her. And so I think with Natalie and Misty, there's always been this kind of invisible tie between the two. We saw it in the pilot when Natalie was hallucinating.
Oh yeah.
And who does she see? It's Misty. It's like they've always had this weird connection between each other. And, like not to keep pulling in my own personal life, but I love Sophie Thatcher.
Ah,
I think she's
yes.
amazing. I think she's fantastic. I'm so proud of her. I'm so in awe of her. And so it's, you know, I feel like I get Misty is drawn to her. I don't get
Yeah.
how Natalie is drawn to Misty, but I totally get how Misty is drawn to Natalie. I think that their relationship is just going to continue to build, especially in the teen timeline. Obviously, sorry, that's the only timeline we got right now with them. But
Oh
it's
God.
yeah, I know.
I know.
Sorry. I am so curious to see like what else they have going for them and is there's going to be any discussion about the black box now and if that's kind of like okay, now we've helped each other out and that part's over or what is going to happen. But I do love to see the evolution of Natalie being the hero of the show and Misty getting the opportunity to be a part of it with her.
Yes.
And I think that that's really special for me and also obviously very special for Misty.
Let's actually talk about the black box moment for a second because Natalie obviously spots Misty with it in the ninth episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love how you've talked about this scene because you said that Misty doesn't really harbor any guilt for
Yep.
destroying the black box in the first place, and that she only kind of wants to help them get rescued because she wants to again kind of emerge as the the hero of the story at the end.
Yeah.
Has she thought about what a return to civilization would look like for her, or is she really just acting on impulse every step of the way in the wilderness?
We I would say impulse. However, there was the moment of the dream sequence on the toilet. So I do think there's things that she's missing in the real world, but I don't think that she's by any means seeing the repercussions of these people are not going to be your besties when you get back home. Like,
Exactly.
I just don't see that happening. I think they're going to use Misty kind of how they use her in the adult timeline. Um, but I don't think Misty's thinking about that too much right now. I think she's just thinking about, yeah, if I help get us home, they're gonna love me and we're gonna have sleepovers and we're all gonna be best friends and we're gonna, like, but she doesn't even think that far ahead. I think it's just
No.
this like hero moment, and that's what she sees. She just wants so badly to have a glimpse of what she had in that second episode of the show where she overhears people talking positively about her behind her
Exactly.
back. And that's something I think about all the time, that the amount of times Misty has heard people talking bad about her all the time, to then having that moment of, I hear people and they're talking about me and they're talking about how amazing I am and that I'm a hero and I'm incredible, and like all these things that just feel like literally like a drug to her. She just
Right.
wants that fix again. And so I think that that's the best way that I can think about how she goes about things, is she's a compliment addict.
She really does have that hero moment, at least for a second, in the season finale,
Yeah.
where we kind of get this full circle moment for Misty because we finally catch up with the flash forwards from the pilot, and we
Yeah.
learn the context of Misty's iconic smirk. So, talk a little bit about the conversations you had with Bart Nickerson, the co-creator of the show and the director of this episode,
Yeah.
about how everyone wanted that scene to kind of play out. Because you're obviously, you're performing for the camera in that moment. You're looking into the camera, but
Yeah.
this smirk also has such a narrative significance. So, how did you make sure you communicated everything that you wanted to in this scene?
As somebody who's like ADHD, anxious, wants everything to be like, I'm a Virgo, like I want things to be quite perfect. And so, of course, I was kind of freaking out because I'm like, oh my God, my lips aren't as crusty and my hair's not as matted. And, this isn't the exact same as the pilot. And Bart kept having to remind me it's not the same as the pilot. This is a retelling. This is a different version of it. And I appreciate that so much because it did give me some relief of like, oh, okay, it doesn't need to be completely exact. They asked me about like, do you think that the pilot was Shauna's retelling and this is the reality? And
I was going
I
to ask
do
a
think,
similar question. Yeah.
yes, and I think that's very true because even with what Shauna says about like how like they were having so much fun, and then you see us of like
Yeah.
how it actually was, and Shauna's the only one enjoying herself. And yeah, I think that that smirk meant so much to me because I never knew what it was about. I always thought in the back of my head, I know something that you don't know. And that was what I
Right.
thought when I was doing the pilot. And I didn't know what that thing was. But in Misty's world, I know something you don't know. And now getting to be a part of it and be like, I know something you don't know, Shauna, and we pulled it off,
Oh, yes.
and getting to be the sidekick to the hero in that moment was for me very exciting as somebody that is played the quote unquote like hated crazy character. Different people have different perspectives of Misty.
Yeah.
It was nice to be on the right side of things for this, so I was pretty stoked about it. I get geeked out by these things because I love seeing the puzzle pieces connect. Like I love seeing that like things getting pushed in correctly and making sense. So
I think it's actually even more sinister if you think about the context, because I mean they're enacting this hunt because Shauna has become such a dictator in a way that if she catches Natalie trying to get the fact that someone has to even that they have to plan this whole thing so that Natalie can actually go seek rescue is honestly disturbing. And
the whole thing is disturbing. Like
yeah,
the whole thing. And I there's a part of me that wonders if somebody else would have found Mari or whatever. I don't think anybody would have done anything
no,
aside from Shauna. Her falling into the pit really was like an accident, and I loved
yeah,
watching it and hearing. It's funny because when I read it, I didn't really understand. Like I thought that like Lottie's just being woo woo Lottie. No, it was so fantastic. And at first I thought she was trying to say like you've been here before, like back in the pilot you were here. But
yeah,
no, she's
no,
literally been there before because she's fallen into this pit before,
exactly.
And so I did find that so like chill worthy. It's sad that there's so much to appease Shauna, but it also just shows like what we're capable of doing due to peer pressure and due to he's a bully, you know, and like,
Mhm.
I mean, not to,
Exactly.
I've never publicly made my stance, but like personally, not the biggest fan of Shauna. You know,
I think a lot of people agree with you.
yeah, and I know all the Shauna defenders are going to come at me, but I'm just saying, like, uh, as a fan, I'm not Team Shauna.